Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. I'm kind of in a situation right now, and that situation is I'm still recovering from a cold, like I've mentioned in the past couple videos now. You might be able to hear it in my voice, but basically what I want to do for a video is actually one that was suggested to me by a subscriber, so shout out to you, man. I had a really great suggestion to do a video that kind of just details my my Nationals preparation run. And there's actually a lot of good information I want to get out to you guys, starting my prep from like Gen Con all the way going up to Nationals, and you know, give some insight onto what I was doing, into what the team was doing. And I do want to get that video out to you guys, but again, recovering from a bit of a cold, so it's been kind of hard to get through that. I kind of want to make sure I have, you know, a clear voice, clear mind, because it is a lot of recollection, a lot of memory, and you know, I want to put a little bit more work into that video. But while I'm still kind of recovering, this is almost like part one or like a prequel to that, and this is going to be my 99% Nats ready build for Yellow Reboot Goku. This was one of the decks I was considering for Nationals. Basically, long story short, I had three main decks that I was prepared to play at Nationals. I had Red SS4 Gogeta, I had Vegito, Rainbow Vegito from you know, set 2, and I also had this deck. This was actually my #1 pick until I was convinced to play Crimson Goku. And again, that's more of a longer story for the video I was talking about that I want to make. But I did want to go over this profile because I'm able to do it while I'm still kind of recovering. And again, it's like a prequel to that video. So I do think this deck is very, very good. I think this deck matches up well into Crimson 2. Like, I kind of talked about it in the meta breakdown yesterday, where if Crimson is kind of becoming top dog, I do think Yellow matches up very nicely into it. I mean, Yellow and Blue, it's just like a tale as old as time. It's a very grindy matchup, and it's very skill intensive. But I do think this pairs well into Red 2, and we'll talk about that throughout the profile. But if you guys are new here, of course, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss a video. And if you guys want to pick up any cards for this deck, please do feel free to use my link to TCG Player. It really does help me out. Anyways, we will get into it. The leader, look at top 10, add an Earthling only or a 1-cost unison. It is very, very nice. You do not have to attack with the unawakened leader. Super relevant against the Gogeta matchup where you can kind of stall their awakening a little bit. That's great. The awaken I normally pull off on turn 2. Very, very, very rare circumstances. I've done it on turn 1. That's like some weird matchups that honestly, I can't remember what matchup I did it in, but I know I did it like at least once. But yeah, typically awaken turn 2, and there's a kind of a specific curve in this deck that I'll go over. But yeah, being able to tap all things, basically besides energy, is great. This leader and this strategy kind of invalidates Blue Unison, which is still another really great thing for the blue matchup. And then be able to search the apes when you need them is great. Being able to combo from the drop to make Z energy, also great. This leader has got quite a lot going for it. Now this main board is 52 cards, and that's why I said it was like 99% Nats ready, because this deck, and Yellow in particular, in my opinion, is pretty reliant on drawing your SCR for endgame pushes. It does feel very difficult to end games without your SCR. But yeah, that's why I wanted this deck to be 52 cards, as small as possible, while still fitting in all the options that I kind of thought were necessary. So of course we have 4 Yamcha. This is you know, your main starter card. You really want this on turn 1. You really want to be able to hit it with Goku. So even though like once you have one on the board, you don't typically play more copies unless you have like weird turns with spare energy. I do want to run the full 4 because it's really important to see it on turn 1. If you don't see it on turn 1, it does feel like you're kind of set behind. And then we have Bulma. So we have the 1-drop Bulma that draws a card, and also when you rest it, you get to discard a card and draw a card. This is great to play on like a turn 2 or turn 3, and then just start resting it with your Awakened Leader or whatever you can rest it with, because it helps you cycle through your deck. And again, it's important for getting to your SCR and your other key cards. And then for the other you know, copies of what we can search on the top 10, we have our 4 copies of the Bulma Unison. If you guys are subscribers to the Patreon, you may have seen in the past, I used to run 1 copy of SS2 Gohan Unison. I don't run it anymore. It doesn't really mesh with the deck all that well, in my opinion, and I also think it's kind of expensive in energy cost for what this deck wants to do. This deck is a pretty aggressive Yellow deck between like 1 energy threats and free play threats. So keeping everything low to the ground is great. Now you might be asking yourself, like, you know, why would you play this deck in particular when Smoke Dragon's a thing? Because this is a deck that's relatively reliant on a Unison, and Smoke Dragon just destroys Unisons, and Smoke Dragon also destroys a lot of other cards on our deck. But the nice thing about Smoke Dragon, if you look at it on a value perspective, they're paying 2 energy to deal with your 1 energy. So you're winning on that trade, again, when you're comparing energy to energy and play for play. And it's very easy to find multiple copies of this. You have multiple cards in your deck that search it out. So whenever you're playing against a deck that may be using Smoke Dragon or any strategy, maybe even like Sin Shenron that can clear your Unison, just make sure to have multiple copies in hand, and reinvesting the one energy into this is never going to really feel bad. Again, you're trading energy with your opponent, and you're winning on those trades, which is pretty good. All right, then for Kid Goku's, we of course have the 4 Explosive Spirit, just the best one you can play with Stalwart Adventurer, this Unison. I would sort of like to play the World Tournament Goku. It's basically just a 20k barrier vanilla with this Unison that can play it for free. That would be nice. I was working on a different build of this where I cut a bit more of the archetype stuff out and just played like as many free play Gokus as possible to be as aggressive as possible. And that build was kind of cool, but you do miss out on some of the main draw power of the deck if you do that. So I opted to not go with that as my main competitive build. But yeah, this card's so good. Barrier blocker, kill rest mode stuff. This deck has tons of removal, which is also great for the red matchups. Keeping their board clear is super key. We have 4 copies of Goku, lands unknown, tap a Bulma, play it, 15k dual attack. You do have to be a bit careful though, because in the red matchup, Wolfang Fist is really annoying when you're trying to set this card up with the evolve play for the 3 copies of Great Ape Goku Instincts Unleashed. Basically, if you don't know, there's a whole play in this deck where you get to net some extra draws. I'll kind of explain it real quick. So what this requires is you have to have Yamcha in play, and he has this other auto that is sometimes hard to resolve. But basically, what it is, you'll play your Goku lands unknown. You'll attack with it twice, right? Because it's dual attack. So once you attack with it twice, it's exhausted. Then with his permanent, you'll evolve the Instincts Unleashed for 1 energy. And then you'll attack with your leader. When you do that, you tap Yamcha, you draw your card or whatever you do with your leader, and then Yamcha restands. But he also says if you have a Goku in rest mode that is not yet attacked, you can switch it to active mode and then you draw an additional card. Since you evolve this in rest mode, it is not yet attacked. This is technically a new card. So Yamcha's able to restand it for that reason and net you that extra draw. So again, adds draw power to the deck, adds aggression to the deck. I do think it's an engine worth playing, but like I was saying before, Wolfang Fist is very annoying for this card. So what you can do in that scenario is, if you have a copy of Explosive Spirit on board, which you probably played for free with your Unison, what you can do is, before you attack with this guy, you can attack with this dude, and he's 15k because you're Unison, so they're probably not going to Wolfang Fist this, right? They just don't really have a reason to when you have this on board. So what you can do is you can evolve on top of this for 1, because this Goku allows you to evolve on top of any Goku, as long as you don't have the Goku you're trying to play in your battle area already. So you can do that, and then you can swing at this twice if you want. This is 15k. If they Wolfang it, you don't really care as much because you already got your evolve play off, and then you swing with leader, you tap the Yamcha, you restand this. So it's slightly suboptimal because you basically lose your barrier blocker going to the next turn, but it is the best way to play around Wolfang Fist and Final Hope Slash if you think your blue opponents are playing that card, right? So just a kind of neat tip for kind of a high-level play that I wanted to explain to you guys. All right, moving on, we have 2 copies of Vegeta Prideful Transformation. I would love to play 3, mostly because it's so good in the Sin matchup, but other matchups, it's not that great. This is also good against Beerus Area Annihilator, though, which is now, like, a new blue staple. A lot of blue decks just want to play Beerus and sit on it because it's a barrier active mode battle card that is really hard for a lot of decks to kill, especially a yellow deck. Like, it's going to be really difficult for a yellow deck, especially this deck, to kill that card. But if they play it, doesn't have deflect, you can counterplay it, that's great. But yeah, this is mainly really good in the Sin matchup, not great against Gogeta because most of their stuff has deflect. But for Gogeta, we are playing the Slug Engine, so I'm playing 3 1-drops and 4 3-drops. I want to see it turn 2 a lot of the time because in the Gogeta matchup especially, it's really stunting to their turn because you basically put them in a situation where, did you draw Kaioken or do you even mainboard Kaioken? If you don't, well, this is kind of turning into a free win for me now. The reason I'm playing so many is because, again, I do want to see it on turn 2, and we want to see more 3-drops than 1-drops because the 3-drop can just play the 1-drop from the deck. So I like this ratio quite a bit. What's also cool, too, is if you go first against Red Sin Shenron and you establish this on turn 2 when they're on 1 energy, if they decided not to use their Dragon Balls, you can just prevent them from drawing cards with their Dragon Balls. Like in the video I did with Peter Katani the other day, he talked about that situation happening to him because he was inexperienced, he didn't know about it. Most like competent Sin players should see it coming, but if you ever catch a Sin player with it, you pretty much just win the game on the spot, which is pretty cool. Then we have 4 copies of Robotic Riposte, of course. 1 copy of Power of a Super Saiyan. Honestly, I want to cut this card because it typically just becomes a draw 1. I don't really have to rest many things because my leader does that all on offense, and defensively, I'm not really trying to combo fight with my opponents. I'm trying to just negate attacks or block attacks. So I've been wanting to cut this card, but I mean, it's too strong of a card to consider cutting in my opinion. I mean, I could just play 51, but by playing this card, I am already playing 51. So yeah, I don't know. It seems weird to cut it. I don't really know the logic on it. But we have 3 copies of I'm the World Champion. Now, for the longest time, I've been a really big proponent of playing 4 of this. And I still really wish that I could, but again, I wanted to drop this to 52 cards as much as possible, just for consistency purposes. And what I noticed about this card is that it is super difficult to actually use going second, because if you're tapping out on 2 to use this, which you can do, but if you do that, you're going to be vulnerable to your opponent's turn 3. And if you don't have the energy you need for a post or something else, you might be in trouble. Now, if you've established like a few barrier blockers and whatever, you can use this relatively safely, or especially if you're playing against a slow deck like a blue matchup. This is super safe to do on turn 2, but against a red deck, it's a little sketchy. So I think 3 is probably pretty good for this particular meta. Then we have 2 Release from Evil, just a super randomly clutch card. Like, your opponent always has to respect it, especially against blue leaders. Like, the blue leader effects are so powerful, and being able to negate those, like Gamma, SS3, even Crimson, is super good. Also, there's been really interesting turns where I've used this against the SS4 Gogeta leader, and now they can't combo the rest mode Sands anymore, and that's super relevant. They lose a lot of value by not being able to combo the rest mode Sands. So yeah, incredible card. I love it. 3 copies of Blocker Negates, of course, and then we go into the game-ending stuff. So we have our SCR, followed by our 3 super combos. It throws off to the side real quick. But yeah, it does feel very hard to win games without this card. It's just that, oppressive and that free. Of course, we have 2 copies of Cooler, and then we have 1 copy of Creator Absorbed and 1 copy of Champa. So this is basically our win condition. We don't have a flashy boss monster. We don't have any crazy game-ending effects except for huge beat sticks, right? Like, we're kind of controlling the early game. We're trying to establish slug, limit their draws. Basically, we're trying to put a handicap on our opponent so we can clean up with these overtuned battle cards, right? So that's the main goal. And now we'll go into the Z deck and the side deck. So grabbing that over here real quick for the Z deck, we have our 1 surmounting where a leader goes to 6 when we awaken. So of course you want to be able to put yourself to 5 for your blocker negates. We have 2 copies of SSB Goku Evolved Defender. This card is so good in the blue matchups. Again, locking those leaders down, locking Crimson down to not be able to attack is huge. You prevent them from getting energy back. You, stunt their turn, a pretty big deal. And then having the Poutine effect whenever you want is also incredible. So this is a great card for grindy matchups. We have 1 Gohan, which is kind of relevant for the sideboard. We're playing Pan in the sideboard for right now. I did want a main board Pan because it is one of our main answers to barrier removal, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. And of course, we have 2 Oolong. You absolutely need it. Copying the power of Mira or your SCR is way too good. And then we have 1 copy of Goku Growing Up Fast. Whenever, the only time I typically play this card is like when I attack and I have the conditions available to Z Awaken, and I know I can push for that like huge double strike crit, right? Like I don't typically play this Z leader and like sit on it. You can do that because he is a 20k Z leader. I just typically don't find myself doing that. So like I said, when I get that attack through and I know that I can Z Awaken mid combat, I'll do that. I'll do the Z Awaken, and then I'll, typically use my SCR to try and force that damage through. That becomes a, 60 double crit. That's going to be really hard for opponent to get out of. So really good game-ending power there. And then we go into the sideboard. So this is actually a 16-card sideboard, and that's only because, I didn't play this deck for Nats, so I just didn't have to finally narrow it down. But I wanted to give you the full 16 just to give you guys some ideas, and you guys can cut whatever you want to cut. So we have 1 copy of Final Flash. It's a card that people still have to respect in yellow. Some people main it, some people don't. Going through Swiss, where deck lists are not public, obviously no one would know that I wasn't maining it, but in Top Cut, they see your deck list, right? So then they know you had the Final Flash, so they have to respect it, especially going to game 2 and 3. 3 copies of Chi-Chi Melee Matriarch. Super cool. This card is searchable by the unawakened side of the leader, and it's just a really great card against the Crimson decks. The SS3 decks, they basically can't use the Dimension Magic. It's really, really strong. 2 copies of Absolute Annihilation. Great in yellow mirrors, great against blue decks, although again, smoke is a card. So now we're trading 3 energy for 2 energy. That's not always going to be as great, but this can be like game winning to slam on certain turns, again, especially against yellow mirrors. So you don't want to play this preemptively willy-nilly, just because again, you got to respect cards like smoke and stuff. But if you have a board set up full of barrier guys, and your opponent's kind of relying on extra cards like Bean and Dimension Magic, you can slam this and then push for big damage. 3rd Cooler, definitely want it against a lot of blue decks. Any of them that are playing Baby Hatch, you probably want this. Against Crimson, you probably don't need the 3rd one because they're not super negate heavy. They're more so combo centric. So you don't need this against every blue deck, but you do want it against the super control-y ones. 2 Time Magic, incredible against Area Annihilator, Rush Attack Vegeta. Anything that's attacking multiple times, Time Magic just shuts it down. And then Pan, I was maining for quite some time. This is one of your main answers to barrier removal. It also helps you set up Z energy, which this deck is not always great at setting up, but I did bump it over to the sideboard. What you could also do is just cut this all together and just end up playing Smoke Dragon. That is also a super valid option. I think, honestly, thinking about it more now, I'd probably just do that because even though this costs 1, you have to play a battle card out of the Z deck that costs at least 2. So this ends up costing 3 minimum. Smoke only costs 2. So yeah, Smoke is probably better than this. And I always just combo Smoke as a Z energy anyway. So, you know, it doesn't have the same Z energy stacking power that Pan has, but it still helps make Z energy and is a bit more energy efficient. But going on to the last of the sideboard ideas, 2 Death Blaster, good against Cell Reboot if you happen to play against it. I thought that deck might get a little popular since it won one of the Zenkai Cups, but I didn't really see it in Nats. But it's also good against any blue ramp deck because if they play a 6-drop Vegeta, that card does not have Deflect, thank God. So you can do this and negate the skills, and then they don't ramp for energy, which is great. Then we have 2 T-Blow, which does seem like it should always be main board because there's just matchups like Gamma, which this card like absolutely crushes Gamma. Negate their Floodgate and negate their Blue Unison. That's so insane. But I don't know. It's not good against Red. It's not even that good against Crimson. Like, again, you get like Area Annihilator, but Crimson doesn't really play Floodgates. So yeah, sideboard is probably where this should live. And then the third, Primal Transformation. I think it's one of the best sideboards against Red Sin because, again, their Dread Destroyer does not have Deflect. This is a great card to use against that. So I'd want this against Sin. But yeah, that's the sideboard idea, guys. But yeah, that's my competitive list. Again, this is the deck that I was, had as my #1 contender for Nationals until I got convinced to play Crimson. So hopefully my voice kind of clears up and I can tell you guys the full story of that sometime this week. But anyways, let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.